I thought I'd take a look at OSRAM W1 and W2 emitters in various flashlights. And the reason I thought to do this was because the two emitters give different beams and different brightnesses. The W1 is like, I don't know, 900 lumens. W2 is about 1500. But the trick is that the W1, the surface area of the actual emitter is about 1 millimeter squared. And the W2 is about 2 millimeters squared. So the W1 is actually more intense because that 900 is coming out of a smaller area. And so you actually get slightly higher candela and a more concentrated beam from it. So here I took a picture of these 5 flashlights in my garage, and I laid them here on my tool chest, and I projected them here at the garage door. And the two K1s here are, we'll start with those. The two K1s have a W1 and W2 emitter each. I have one in white and one in blue, so that makes it a little bit easy to see. And the thing here, and let me go ahead over here and turn on these arrows. So this W1 here, that's the hotspot, and this W2, that's the hotspot. You can see that with the same exact host, same reflector, having a larger emitter just makes a larger hotspot. So that makes sense. But what if we take a W1 and put it in a tinier reflector, like a smaller one, like in a C8 Plus by Convoy? And what you see is that in this case, the hotspot's roughly the same size as the W2 would be in the K1. And then if I take the W2 that's in this K1 and I put it in a KR1, which is even a little smaller than the C8 Plus, I mean, they're pretty similar in size, but it's a little smaller. You can see it gets even bigger. So here we got the C, it's like, this is pretty good to compare because it's like the W1 versus W2 in similar hosts. Over here, exact same host, but different emitters. And then over here, what we have is a W1 in the smallest light that I own with these emitters. This is the Manker E05i titanium. And you can see it's a relatively big hotspot here. Now, over on the right here, I got some bonus materials. I grouped the lights by the relative sizes. So this is basically the same thing I have over here, but I'm just trying to make it a little more obvious that a KR1 with its large reflector gives a very small pencil beam with a W1. However, if you take the same KR1, I said KR1, I'm sorry, going back, the K1, right? If you take the same K1 and you use a W2, it's going to be roughly the same size as a W1 in a Convoy. So like either of these lights give you roughly the same hotspot. And then over here, we have the W2 like in this black K1, but this is a KR1. And then all of a sudden you can see it is a much bigger hotspot. Go ahead and turn on these arrows and these labels. And then lastly, I've got the Manker, which is right here. I threw in a bonus C8. This is an Astrolux C8 copper, which is a similar host to these Convoys C8 Plus. The reason I did is maybe you have a Cree XHP 50.2 and you know what that's like. Well, if you do, it's a similar size as the OSRAM W1 when in this really tiny pocketable Manker light. So just another little thing I threw in. So anyways, here's the breakdown. And I also want to point out that these intensities, don't look at the intensities because I had them set to whatever brightness I thought was good to prove the size of the hotspots. But ultimately, now let's just, now that I've done all this, what have I got to say about it? Well, this is my thoughts on this. My thoughts are the most important lights here are probably the K1 W1, just because it's such an intense pencil beam. I know that a lot of folks on subreddit Flashlight recommend the W2 emitter in the K1, but I just feel like for that slight size difference, they're both really tiny. I mean, you're not going to be doing any kind of walking around, at night with your dog with these flashlights. So if I'm casting a beam, a quarter mile away or whatever I'm doing, either of these would be good. So why would I look for the W1? Well, it's more efficient. The battery runtime's about, I think they say that the W2 here uses about 50% more battery. So that's nice. It goes slightly farther, 610,000 candela versus 600,000 candela is what Hank Wang rates them. So they're basically a wash, but really what it really boils down to for me is the kind of surgical precision of this light really helps me pick out exactly what I want to look at far away. I feel like at the ranges I tend to look at across fields, this one, it's a little bigger. It's not a problem. And lastly, and this is the big deal, the W1 it's a little more intense, and that makes it look a little bit more like a lightsaber when you're shining it up in the sky. It's a little more impressive when you're showing it off. However, with that said, if you're getting a colored OSRAM like the blue here, I actually like the W2. Just because the blue's so intense already that spreading it out a little further doesn't seem to matter. I don't know why. The blue is just super intense. It's the most intense. I think it's more intense than even the white as far as a beam goes. Not as a hotspot on something, but as a beam. And I find this KR1 W2 kind of in a weird spot because it's not super bright, right? The hotspot is diffuse enough that it's just not as intense as these guys over here. It's just in the middle ground. I actually don't use it very often. I'd much rather carry this little guy because it's just so tiny. I can tuck it in a coin pocket and then tuck maybe a D4 V2 flood in another pocket. So that's the way I'd rather roll than putting this slightly clunkier thing. So between these two lights, the KR1 and the Manker EO5i, I would actually take the EO5i. I just think it's more pocketable and a little nicer. But here's the real trick. These three right here, right? I said I'd probably take the Anchor. However, this is the thing. There's a light that's not pictured here. And the light that's not pictured is a copper KR1 with SPT 90.2, the luminous. That I found, and even though I didn't take a picture of it, I found the hotspot was about the same size as these two guys. About the same size as this EO5i from Manker and this XHP 50.2. Now, why do I bring it up? Because it is so bright. Now, it doesn't have a great runtime, gets hot really fast, but I guess if I had to keep two lights out of all the lights we're talking about today, it'd probably be the W1, the K1 W1, and then the not shown KR1 with SPT 90.2. That's really awesome. Bonus runner-up, this blue W2. I love it. Don't hate any of these lights. I'm going to probably keep them all, but I think those are really stellar lights. You know what? I also really like this Maker. I do. I guess the ones that are going to see most use is this one because it's an EDC light. I'm going to throw it in my pocket all the time. I'm not going to EDC any of these big boys. But when I'm out playing around with, friends and shining flashlights, I like this one a lot. I like this blue. And then that little KR1 that the SBT is amazing. This KR1 W2 is not really impressing anybody. I bought it with the intention to EDC it. I'd just rather EDC this guy, actually. It's significantly lighter, actually significantly smaller, even though it doesn't look like it. So those are my thoughts. I hope you enjoyed this and hope it helps people that have one of these lights kind of compare what they're buying next, because I know I didn't fully understand how these emitters were going to sit in the various hosts until I got them all.